I'm the Dreaded Geek. Welcome back. Today we're going to do a review of a Kickstarter game that I filmed an unboxing of a week or so ago. The game we're going to review today is Myth. I haven't had a chance yet to play this game very many times, but I feel that I've played it enough to get an understanding of how it works and to be able to talk about what I like and what I don't like about the gameplay. There are still some things that are difficult for me that will get easier with more plays, and I'll mention those too. But this isn't... It hasn't been out long, and I wanted to get a review done sooner rather than later. So, this is my first feelings for the game. As I mentioned when we did the unboxing, I like big epic games, and this is a big epic game. There is a lot to it. There's a lot of rules. The rules are somewhat finicky in places, but once you get them into your head, the game flows really well, and that I was really impressed with. For a game this detailed in terms of its rules and its simulationism, I was impressed with how well it flows once you get used to it. So, each character has their own deck of cards, and I'm looking for some of the cards that are already sleeved. Each character has their own deck of cards, and during the gameplay you have a hand of cards which you can use to perform special abilities for your character. The cards might give you attacks, they might give you more movement, they may allow you to perform some of the... here we go. To perform some of the quest objectives. So going through a deck of cards, this one for the soldier, which is relatively straightforward. Most of the cards are either actions that allow you to deal damage directly to your opposition, either one attack to one thing, or lighter attacks to a number of enemies. Two defensive cards that allow you to take damage or not take damage in order to defend your allies. I found most of the cards to be relatively easy to understand, relatively easy to apply given what's in the rulebook, and a couple of the more complex ones are actually described in detail as to how to use those cards and exactly what the rules mean on a card-by-card basis. That's the other deck that I like playing with, so it's been sleeved already. These cards have the quest objectives on them. I quite like the quest system in this game. Every time you enter a new area in the game, you can choose to draw a new quest objective. You draw a quest, it gives you a particular objective and a reward for performing that objective. You can choose to go after that objective or to continue with the main objective of the quest that you're performing at that time. But sometimes the rewards for the smaller quests actually enable you to perform the bigger quests without as much difficulty. So it's worth going after them first. There's the small item cards, and they're divided up into, in much the same way as most MMOs or those who've played Diablo and similar games. The grey-white coloured cards are the normal rarity, the normal power level cards. The green ones are slightly more powerful, and then the blue ones are the rares, the really powerful weapons and items. Take out some hero and some monster tokens and put them on the board so we can have an example of what gameplay looks like. So for an example here of gameplay, the two heroes have just entered this board piece. These icons down on the bottom of the board tell you how to go about setting up the board for play. This would not be how this board would be set up. I'm just using it for an example. By default, players have, heroes have, adventurers have, call them what you will, to move. It allows them to move towards their opponents. However, for the most part, the game is set up, the power level of the game is set up in such a way that you don't want to be running into combat, positioning yourself in a position of advantage, using an attack to destroy one enemy, moving in, destroying another one. This game is set up for much more epic action than that. So our two heroes would come onto the board, would move onto the board, and would not be able to do a whole lot more than that in that first turn. The enemies would, according to the hero's threat rating, then activate, and they would use their move to swarm whichever enemy they feel. There's a whole rule system in place to decide which enemy will be swarmed first, which one they feel is the more threatening of the two. So this may occur. And this is the kind of situation, as dire as this looks for this hero, this is the kind of situation the game rule is built to deal with. At this point, the soldier here would play an attack card and would gain a dice pool to roll. The dice pool would be dependent on the attack card that was played in the first place, the hero's base dice pool, and additional dice given to the hero by any equipment that they had equipped at the time. Usually that's a default of a primary and secondary weapon. For the soldier, the fighter character, this one, that would usually be a sword and a shield. So in this situation, as a base level 1 entry-level character with entry-level gear, you could expect to be rolling 3d10. The difficulty of most of the mobs is 4, 5, 6 sometimes, up to 8s and 9s for some of the big bosses. Only one die has to roll that number, and assuming that the attack was an area of effect attack that covered this whole area, the soldier would be able to destroy all of these with one successful roll. And that's the kind of epic action that this game is set up to create. The soldier has a few attacks that are built around destroying one enemy with a large number of hit points, but most of his attacks are big sweeping attacks that cover the whole area in front of him, or perhaps the whole area to one side or the other. The Acolyte, on the other hand, has a few attacks that are built around an area, and one of those is actually at range as well, which is a really nice situation to be in. That is a situation the Acolyte could take care of even from across the board with one successful attack, but only with that one action card. Most of the Acolyte's attacks are built around dealing large amounts of damage to a boss, to something with more hit points. So the different characters are built to take care of different situations, and having a little bit of consciousness of that when you're playing the game will greatly aid you in dealing with the different types of enemies and the different types of situations the game will put you in. This is not a character who likes to be swarmed, so coming in and running into the center of the board and aggravating enemies that would then come and swarm him would spell certain death for the Acolyte very quickly. The soldier storming into the middle and getting swarmed by bad guys is exactly where he wants to be, and then the Acolyte can stand back here and pick off the stragglers one by one, any that he missed. That's basically it. That's the gameplay. You make your movement, you play any cards from your hand that give you special actions, and that's it for your side of the game. The really interesting part of the game comes in how the game plays back. During the main phase of the turn, which is when you're making these movements and playing these cards and taking these actions and dealing damage, every card you play has a cost in action points. Once you've spent a total of 6 action points, the game gets a turn. It's called the darkness phase. The darkness gets to act. And at this point your enemies come in, your enemies swarm you, your enemies might spawn more enemies if you haven't taken care of the spawn points yet, and various other bad effects could happen depending on what quest you're playing, what you have out on the board at the time, and so on. The alternating between the hero's turn and the game's turn, the darkness phase, to me was really interesting. Once I had that down in my head and was able to switch backwards and forwards between the two easily, the game flowed pretty well. Once there's no more cards in your hand that you can use, there's no more ways to generate action points in order to keep that switch happening, you just declare your turn, the round over, and there's card refresh rules and various things like that that happen at that point in time. So there's 2 cycles to get your head around. But once you've done that, and once you're able to sort of settle in on how the game flows, to me it flowed pretty well, and I was able to enjoy the game. The first game is going to be tricky. It's going to be difficult to understand the rules. The rules are really not well written. There are some rule summaries available for download out there. I highly recommend getting out there and finding a copy of them. It makes the rules a lot easier to understand. Read the rule summary, try to read the rule book, sit down and play the game with the rule book in front of you, try to work out how it all works. And at that point it'll start to sink in. It really isn't that complicated once you get the hang of it. But don't try to understand the rule book from scratch without trying to play the game. I don't think it's possible. It really isn't well laid out. It's not an easy rule book to understand just dry like that, in my opinion anyway. But on the whole, I enjoyed this game. I think it's well worth buying, and I'd recommend it for anybody who enjoys this kind of extreme, epic, immersive game experience. And that has been a review of Myth, the board game.
And I am the Dreaded Geek. Thanks for watching.